I would say land ownership patterns have changed quite a bit. Historically, there was a lot of paper company land, timber company land in northern Wisconsin, and that's drying up like crazy. It's just getting sold into smaller and smaller parcels. We've added probably 15,000 acres in the last 15 years to the county forest.
Is there a sense of what is driving the population growth at Crex Meadow?
Habitat quality. That's like the nuance of the birds require an open landscape. Okay, what does that mean? So the quality of habitat, it got a lot better. And what that means is,
if somebody doesn't know what a barrens is.
Yeah, the barren system is what they call a globally imperiled system, and it's unique to like very droughty soils. I mean, it's very rare. They exist in small areas around the country, and Wisconsin has barrens in northeast Wisconsin, and it's a very diverse landscape.
Barrens habitat is one of the most under threat habitat types like nationwide, and so there is a larger call to action around barrens habitat for some other bird species.
There's been a lack of information on
Hey everyone, Nick Larson here, host of the Birdshot Podcast, the show where we go beyond the flush to explore the full upland hunting experience with guests from all across the uplands, from shotguns to bird dogs to habitat and conservation, and the traditions that connect all of us to a life afield. The Birdshot Podcast is presented by Onyx Hunt and supported by folks just like you via our Patreon community. If you want to stay up to date and not miss any of our upcoming episodes, be sure to subscribe and follow the show in your podcast player or YouTube, wherever you're listening or watching today. Go ahead and tap that button. Thank you for doing so. And with that said, let's get into today's conversation on the Birdshot Podcast. Welcome, Mike and Aldo, to the Birdshot Podcast. Welcome back, buddy.
Yeah, good to be here.
Oh, where do we start, my friend? You're a county forester in Wisconsin. What was the day in the life of the county forester today?
Yeah, the day in the life was driving around the county forest. So the county forest, there's I think 30 in Wisconsin, and the county board supervisors sort of oversee the departments. And I was giving a tour to one of the county forest board members who was interested in barrens, and actually had a really neat story. He had grown up in the area, and he remembers the Muckwa Barrens, which is the northern part of Bayfield County, in his youth, talking about sharp-tails, and he would see dozens of sharp-tails on the Muckwa Barrens, and now they're very low numbers, and the feds are working hard to kind of bring that population back. But it was neat to talk to him about the 60s, 70s, and 80s of like, yeah, I'd be bow hunting on the edge of the Muckwa Barrens, and a dozen sharp-tails would just fly in and roost all around me. It's just that oral history of a guy like that who's got that connection to the land base. Because I think what happens is you see the land in a relatively short amount of time. Like you're here for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you just expect this is how it's looked. And then you kind of wonder, why aren't the birds here? Or what's different? And you talk to somebody who's been here for a lot longer and just like, well, look totally different in 1965. And it's like, oh, really? How? Why? And then so we drove around, and he just told some great stories about just, it was turkey hunting, deer hunting, but sharp-tails in the Muckwa Barrens and how the habitat's changed over time. But yeah, he'd tell stories of, yeah, we'd be deer hunting and up go 12 sharp-tails. And, we'd go out for a walk and we'd shoot some rough grouse and shoot a bonus sharp-tail, back in the 70s. So it was neat, and he sees, he looks at our budgets, and he helps, they make management decisions on what we're going to do as a county forest program. And so I gave him a tour of the Barnes Barrens and Bass Lake Barrens, which are two county forest owned barrens. And he was super excited to see the work we're doing and really supportive. So yeah, I was giving a tour of the barrens, and we didn't see any sharp-tails, but we talked a lot about sharp-tails and the history of them in northwest Wisconsin. So it was a good day.
I love it. We're going to talk about them today. And that, funny enough, that mixed bag rough grouse sharp-tail hunt has a little bit of extra relevance in our conversation today. Does he no longer live in northern Wisconsin?
He does. It was interesting. His family has been in the area since like the late 1800s. And they had a cabin just northeast of Iron River on Long Lake. And so that's why he knew that kind of Muckwa County forest area. And then, grew up in southeast Wisconsin and moved back probably 25 years ago, and ran a bed and breakfast, and now he's semi-retired. So yeah, he still does some hunting out there. They have some hunting property actually, right? It was another quick funny story is I met him on his property this morning. He has 40 acres surrounded by county forest, and they would always hunt this area. And one year they showed up and there's a for sale sign. And they're like, is this a joke? This is public land. And they called the number. It's like, no, actually it was a private 40 that was never posted. So they called the guy up and ended up buying the 40. That was like in 1985, I think. So now they own an in-holding piece in the county forest. So yep, he's still deer hunts and turkey hunts and whatnot. So yeah, he's active in the area.
So you mentioned turkeys and timelines and stuff too, which we'll get to, but I know last time we had you on, probably a couple of years ago, we talked extensively. It was spring season. We talked about the turkeys in Bayfield County, Wisconsin, the reintroduction, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that has changed dramatically. You've seen that. He's seen that. That's just one of those interesting things. How many years have you been working on the county forest in Bayfield now?
22 years now.
22. Okay. Anything really jump out at you as far as like, major differences, whether it's within the forest itself or from a regulatory perspective? Like what major changes have you seen in that period of time?
What I've seen changes, back to the turkeys, they released turkeys on the county forest like weeks before I first started in 2003. So now I was driving out to meet this individual and I saw 10 jakes. Don't tell anybody, but just like the number
of bleep that road name out.
Yeah, that's all right. It's turkeys. There's plenty of them. Now I can say that after seeing none when I first showed up to them being just ubiquitous across the county forest. So the fact of seeing so many turkeys is unique. I would say land ownership patterns have changed quite a bit. Historically, there was a lot of paper company land, timber company land in northern Wisconsin. And that's drying up like crazy. It's just getting sold into smaller and smaller parcels. And so I remember a lot of people that grew up hunting or drove north to hunt, they'd hunt paper company land. You just hear that. And now it's really getting harder and harder to find because it's 40-acre parcels, 10-acre parcels, and just smaller and smaller parcels. So, and that's just been a story across the country, just fragmentation, smaller ownership, people just making smaller lots. And so the county's we used to have a lot of industry land within our ownership. And so we drive by this paper company land. And probably 10 years ago, the county was pretty active in trying to acquire those inholdings and keep them as working forest land. So like we've added probably 15,000 acres in the last 15 years to the county forest, which is great.
As a net add?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. 177,000, let's say. And I think when I started, it was 163 or something. So over 10,000 acres we've added, which is, I think every county is a little bit different about public land and the amount of available acres and, interest from the county board to acquire more acres into the public domain. And we had large paper company ownership and there was opportunity to pick those up. So that's been a big change, just more driveways, more cabins on the private edges, and the county acquiring those major inholdings, which is really great because then we just keep our working forest model sort of just extends right across the line. Tourism, I definitely would say we're seeing more and more activity. I'd say motorized use is just blowing up in the 23 with UTVs and just pressure on the trails. Yeah. I mean, with a large forest, we almost have 1,500 miles of roads. And so I'd say just the amount of, it used to be just you'd sit on your ATV. But just the growth of motorized use on the county forest has ballooned.
Yeah.
But the forestry end and the markets sort of ebb and flow. I mean, there was really strong markets when I started. And I would say generally there's a general decline in timber markets, just interests change, markets change. We lose a mill or a mill switches sort of what they're working with, but we've been pretty fortunate to have stable markets generally. That's always sort of the big worry is how are the wood market's going to hold up, but so far that's been pretty good. But other than that, it is, I've been here long enough to see acres managed and now look at that and go, geez, that's really tall wood. I mean, that's 20 years old and I've been here. So like just the timing and being in one place long enough, you get to see just the forest change. And, I think a lot of people when they're driving around are, they're seeing the forest too, but I remember when I set that up, when it was planted and now I look at it and it's 20 years old and I get to watch a certain piece through time because I'm having a lot of connection with the land there. And that's really rewarding, but that's been a change. But overall, I mean, I tell you, the grouse numbers, again, don't tell anybody, but those have been there, really solid. Deer is sort of ups and downs, but yeah, some changes, but overall, not much, nothing major.
Yeah. I don't know how connected you are. I knowing you personally, I assume you've got some knowledge, but like on the wood markets, where the wood is going, I think most people would be familiar with, obviously the world uses less paper than it did 30 years ago. That's certainly a factor. What is the story have we stabilized? Are we seeing less and less demand for aspen, pulpwood, that sort of thing? Are there other things that are picking that up? Like, I guess what, if anything, can you comment from on, where the wood is going?
Sure. I would say the aspen specifically has been really strong. I'd say there's a couple mills, Louisiana Pacific, that Smart Side product, which has become, it's really grown. I think a lot of people are using that. They've been really successful in marketing that. So that's a real bright spot. We have those LPs, got mills scattered around. And so aspen's been really strong. Red pine poles, telephone poles is really, that's in high demand. It's a high value product. We have a lot of red pine. Not everybody thinks you got this big red pine, they're all going to make telephone poles. They don't. Even at a high quality stand, it might only be 20 or 30%, but that drives the cost so high. And I don't really have all the answers on the markets we lost or why, but it seems like red pine pulp has really been a struggle. I don't know.
Where does red pine pulp, what does that get used for?
I think it's mixed in some paper, and we lost the Wisconsin Rapids mill, which is a big mill that was in central Wisconsin. And that was a huge consumer of pulp in general in the state, like millions of cords a year. And that's a huge loss to like the whole wood basket. And it was like, we have a lot of red maple and sugar maple, and they're not quality saw logs. So they're just small diameter pulp. They're biomass in the pulp market that they would go into that for paper. And that mill closed, and there's a number of reasons. I mean, it was kind of, 100 years ago, that mill was built in the middle of Wisconsin. There was wood coming from every direction. And as like agriculture and development, sort of the wood basket moved north. And so then they had this truck wood and put it on a rail further south. So that it just got to be more and more expensive to haul low value product that far. And just the, market pressures on that were just too much, and it closed. And back in the day, there used to be mills all over the country, just small mills, and then they sort of consolidated, and they ramped up to larger and larger production. Kind of double-edged sword. It's like you lose that one mill, you lost basically all your consumption, and that's kind of what happened there. There isn't a plan B to send 1 million cords, so then that just stays in the woods. So then we end up having to change our sort of utilization expectations, where we're more tolerant of their trying to be sensitive to the needs. There isn't a market there, and before we used to be able to sell that stuff, and if we can't, we got to recognize what we can sell. Oak saw logs, the crane mat market, power lines, right-of-ways, and those wooden crane mats, are used for heavy equipment to drive on. That's a really stable market. We have our wood going into that. And then, I chatted with you, some of our wood goes to that Sappy mill over in your neck of the woods, and that goes to make clothes. It gets rayon. So, it's just, and they're getting creative with the decline of paper, which is real. And, I'm hoping we can get into better biomass with our wood. And there is some biomass in the XL power plant right here in Ashland, where they're using it for power and have been since the 70s, which is cool to see. Innovation, markets, more wood. We're always hoping for, those skyscrapers. There's that mass timber market where there's some cool buildings built in Milwaukee and other places where they're using more wood for
structural timber.
Yes, 18-story buildings, and getting the building code to sort of be amenable to using wood, which is again, those aren't like going to open up a huge mill, but anything we can do to put more wood in the system. I think people like seeing wood in a room, in a house, and I think it's it's an appealing product, and we just need to be able to produce that market and get the mills. But yeah, so and loggers are getting older, and who wants to get into logging, and
that business
really
mechanic.
expensive. So I would say generally we have an oversupply of wood. So there's a sort of national conversation about the feds cutting more wood, which I support, active forest management. But what we're seeing is, it depends what product you're going to cut. If there's parts of the country that they don't have a market, and maybe a market will develop, but we have a lot of first thinning red pine that we can't even give away. And we're in the middle of the wood basket, and there's reasons for that. And I don't pretend to know all the reasons. And in the recent state budget, they're going to spend quite a bit of money trying to build like a feasibility assessment to sort of package, where's our supply? What do we have on the market? What's not getting sold? So we can be more, I think, effective at communicating to the industry, the markets, what we have, what we don't, gaps in what's out there, and opportunity areas to try and develop these markets. Because we have wood, and we're growing a lot of wood, and I think we should be proud to grow a sustainable wood over, bamboo or paper free. I wish I could market, hey, this tissue is generating rough grouse habitat or golden-winged warbler habitat. And it is, in good faith, our forests are all certified now, trying to be accountable to that. And we're hoping we get some market edges based on sustainability. And I believe in the work we're doing, but, it's just, the mat is more urbanized public. Where's the wood coming from? And, expectations on what they want to see when they come up to the great Northwoods. They don't necessarily want to see a clear cut. So we're always there's a lot of forces at play, but yeah, it seems like, and I don't run timber sales. I set them up on the front end. So in terms of where all the wood gets sorted, I'm not exactly sure, but it's decent. Aspen strong, which is great for grouse and young forest. And we hope it continues.
Yeah. So even the county forester has to learn how to market and sell his products.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Or is this so, or specialized, I'm on the front end. I work mostly in barrens. So my business is trying to get rid of trees and have them grow back.
Right.
I do it all too. I set up plenty of wood.
It's too bad they don't use aspen in like AI chips. We'd be preparing for a heyday here.
That's the thing. You hear these stories about even in batteries, how, wood and like the cellulose and just, I think the U.S. is good at like having the idea, but like execution, it just takes a lot of work and energy and investment to get to that point. We're kind of waiting for the next breakthrough. And the Forest Products Lab in Madison, is doing good work. But absolutely. I mean, I think we're using a lot of resources. It's just like, all right, can we get some wood in as much of that as possible? Because wood is good, as they say, at least I say.
Yeah. Well, you'd like to think that, if the incentives made sense, hey, we got this renewable, sustainable resource, it works out economically, the R&D's been done by maybe subsidized on the R&D front, that the businesses would come and fill it. But, there's other barriers there. There's momentum, like if you've been doing something a long ways or the same way for a long time, takes a lot of, to step back and shift and make a strategic change. There's that kind of stuff. So it's maybe not easier said than done, I suppose. But I know did you ever get anywhere looking into the fabric stuff, wood going to sappy, used in fabric? Mike was kind of joking with me at one point that we were going to work on an underwear sponsorship for the Birdshot Podcast, because there is a company out there that makes underwear out of wood fiber, right? But we couldn't track down the sourcing exactly at that time.
Yeah, I looked into a little bit. I actually called the mill, and they were like, "What? It's just too disconnected down the pipe chain." Tencel, Tencel is
that's right.
The type of the company that's like sourcing wood, sustainable wood harvest into this fabric, and it's a European thing. I think it's out of Austria or something. I think it's a kind of a small market. I don't know. I was trying to chase it down, but I don't know if some of our wood is going into the European processing, or if it's just European wood. I think a lot of it was just European wood, but the concept is great. I mean, textiles is a huge industry, and it's such a soft fabric. You should really get some. I think you should buy some, Nick. It's really a good product. I mean, I'm wearing some.
What's it called again? Do you remember?
Tencel is Beneath is the name of the boxer brief brand, and then within that there's Tencel is sort of the fabric textile company that's focused on the wood. So you can kind of you find that all on their website, and it's a neat story. I mean, I'm a huge fan of renewable resources and to generate some more sustainability and markets on that, I'm all
You
for it.
did
But yeah,
mention,
it's interesting what we can use wood for. I think there's a lot of good ideas, but like execution, getting mills. And I think it's, pivoting. A lot of it's cardboard for Amazon boxes. That's been the real bright spot in
there you go.
packaging, and as we do more electronic stuff, Amazon shipping a ton, and Amazon brown boxes is a huge bright spot for some of these mills. But retooling, I mean, everything's so digital, and to build up brick and mortar building and hire people and try and bring in raw products, it's sort of most of these mills now are owned by private equity firms, so it's a portfolio thing. And I think the days of owned and operated small mills, they're sort of switching hands a lot. So it's there's even more disconnect from what they own and what it takes to kind of do the local investment. A lot to it.
Yeah, for sure. You did mention LP Smart Side, which that's if anybody's not familiar, I think we talked about it here on the show before. That's a siding product made. A lot of people use it for like siding exterior buildings. I actually put it in, you might be able to see it on the screen here. I put it in it's my interior walls in the Birdshot Podcast studio. So we're supporting grouse habitat here as well, but that's a great product.
It is. My house has got that cheap vinyl plastic siding. I'm looking for a day I can throw the Smart Side on.
Yeah, excellent. Well, when you're not wearing the county forester hat, which you pretty much are all the time, in spirit, but you're also on the board of the Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society. Let's shift the conversation a little bit, talk about Wisconsin Sharp-tailed grouse, habitat populations, etc. And perhaps most importantly, we've had a development this year where there's going to be a very limited, I'll let you tell us more about it, but a very limited hunting season on Wisconsin Sharp-tailed grouse this fall. I can't believe it, Mike.
Exciting. This is a habitat success story. This is really big picture for a very small population is a real bright spot. There's not a lot of game bird populations that go on a huntable list. Of anything we're hearing about, like sage grouse and prairie chickens and loss of habitat. And we have that challenge here too, even with sharp-tails. But localized, we've done a lot of good work and having some success. So yes, I'm currently on the board of the Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society. I've been on for probably half a dozen years. I was asked to join by a fellow member, and the Sharp-tailed Grouse Society has been around since 1990. It's a collection of retired DNR folks, passionate sharp-tail folks, passionate barrens folks, and we're fighting basically for the habitat, and on top of the habitat supports sharp-tails among other species. And it's been fun to be on the board, and the older generation of folks on the board are sort of transitioning into a younger generation, and that sort of handing the baton with their legacy and knowledge. It's been great. And as a forester, I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I sure as heck really value that side of things. And as a habitat manager, how can we provide that high quality habitat? So yeah, I've been on the board, and we're working hard to spread the word on barrens and sharp-tails and fight for funding and be an advocate for that unique landscape of the barren system where those birds are hanging out in northwest Wisconsin. And we hand out some small grants to the DNR and the feds and the county to help out purchasing equipment, contract mechanical treatment. These barren systems are open, and that's what the birds require, but there's always trees and brush growing in all the time. They need prescribed burn, so they need advocates. And at the state level, federal level, where the Sharp-tailed Grouse Society is getting more and more engaged in all of that, and our membership's growing. And we got some swag and stuff and t-shirts, and just trying to spread the word. It's not a lot of people know about sharp-tails in Wisconsin or the barrens habitat. And so I think when people hear about, like, you have sharp-tails, that's really, where are they, and how many do you have, and where they live. So yeah, it's been a fun ride on the board, and things are going well. I mean, like I said, back to the season, there's a series of barrens properties in northwest Wisconsin, and there were some thresholds set. I sit on the Sharp-tail Advisory Committee, which has a bunch of stakeholders that get together every year to talk about the condition of the population. I represent the Wisconsin County Forest Association on the advisory committee, and we meet with the DNR. We meet with other stakeholder groups. Audubon is there. The Wisconsin Conservation or Wildlife Society is there, and a number. The Rough Grouse Society sits on this, and every year we come together and talk about the status of the bird and whether, it warrants a season. It's safe to have a season. Be really cautious about, these small populations and thresholds for harvest. And so we said would be a sustainable harvest level. And this year, one property exceeded that. And the threshold, the requirements to meet a harvest was to have a 10,000 acre property with at least 100 dancing males in the spring.
Okay.
And then we needed favorable spring weather. We needed to say that the habitat was in good shape and moving in the right direction before we said, okay, we're going to have a harvest season. And we met that threshold. And it's Crex Meadows down by Grantsburg in western Burnett County. And it's been a heck of a success story. I mean, 5 years ago, they had 25 dancing males. Now they have 115 or 120. And it's all because, again, why didn't they have 120 years ago? Well, burn windows, resources, money, timing. I mean, a lot has to come together, even on these state properties, to make sure it's such a battle to fight succession. But it's worth it, and it needs to be done. And even on focused properties, it can be a real challenge to keep up with it. And you kind of can fall behind, and you're always chasing the 8 ball. They got on top of it, did great work, and they had a population there that was small, and it's just blown up. And I expected even the hunting season is not going to negatively impact the population at all. That's just going to be additional harvest, very small harvest and opportunity. But I fully expect that population, weather dependent, ups and downs are how these grouse populations can be. But generally, as we add better habitat, we'll be adding more birds, which is awesome. That's a big property. It can handle more birds. It's not full of birds, so there's open areas. So I'm really expecting good things to come on Crex Meadows. Not every property has that story. I mean, there's some struggles on other properties to get the habitat in better shape, but there's a number of bright spots on other barrens properties in Wisconsin, in the Northwest Sands, where the bird populations are responding. So in the property I manage, or the two properties I help manage, the Barnes Barrens and Bass Lake Barrens, the Barnes Barrens had 18 dancing males, which for a 1,000 acre property, that's awesome. And then the Bass Lake Barrens is new, and birds have not found that property yet, but we're trying to really get it in good shape so the birds will find that property and colonize it.
Yep.
And we're adding little populations across the Northwest Sands that builds resiliency into the overall population, genetic diversity, and so on and so forth. But that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, the season is going to be, you have to apply for a lottery tag, that's a lottery application. And they're due by August 1st. So coming up here, not too far out. It would be great to have a lot of people apply. It would show the state and everybody, hey, there's a lot of interest. I think we're all cautious. Hey, is it time to have a season? What does a season look like? But I can assure you the number is very conservative, very small. We're never going to shoot a lot of birds. Never. I think the idea is we can provide opportunity to a limited number of folks. And it just shows the North American model of wildlife conservation is when you feel like you've met that threshold, hunters, are funding a lot of this through Pittman Robertson dollars. And now, we should have that opportunity to, it's a well-managed population with a sustainable harvest. Let's bring in, another tenet of that. And that's, regulated harvest. So that's what's happening at Crex. And so August 1st, the deadline, and the season, if you're fortunate to draw a tag, of which there's going to be very few, but probably in the low 20s, it'll be October 18th to November 9th would be the season. So it's just a fairly short season.
Couple 3 weeks to get a season in. Yep.
But it's I mean, you go to that property, it's pretty neat to talk to the people that were doing the surveys this spring. Surveying for sharp-tails is at some point you have so many birds flying around, it's hard to know like how many birds did we see and what's recorded. And it's just neat. They're talking about, we flushed 15 on the walk in, and we flushed 18 over here. I mean, in Wisconsin, like flush groups of that big and just hear birds calling all the time. I mean, again, super bright spot for sharp-tails in Wisconsin on a core property that's doing really well. It's awesome.
So 100 plus dancing males. Is that one lek? Is that multiple leks? How does that break down?
Yeah, good question. Multiple leks. I think the biggest lek had 25 dancing males. And it's a growing population, so it's interesting. There's another property called the Nemacolin Barrens, and that property is I think it had 87 dancing males. So that's doing really well
Is that
too.
9,000 acres? How big is
I
Namakogan?
think it's like
Do you recall?
6,000 or
6, okay.
7,000. Yeah. I mean, that's a growing population, but it's growing more slowly since the property is starting to fill up. And the leks are very stable, and like there's X number of leks, and the birds occupy those. And Crex is growing so fast that the birds are still establishing what their leks are going to be. And so there's a lot of random dancing, I think, by a couple birds here, one bird there. So I think as it develops, there'll be more sort of focused leks. But I think there's half a dozen leks of various sizes. But I think the biggest one was pushing 25, which, again, man, to see 25 dancing males on a lek in Wisconsin, that's pretty cool.
For the folks that would know, whether it's the wildlife biologists or the property managers, is there a sense of what is driving the population growth at Crex Meadows? I'm thinking, like, how much is weather related? We've had a couple milder winters, but 2 years ago was a very mild winter. Last year was mild in some ways. I think that, simple answer, all of the above, but what conversations have you heard?
Habitat quality. That's like the nuance of the birds require an open landscape. Okay, what does that mean? Exactly. And I think so the quality of habitat, it got a lot better. And what that means is there are too many standing tall trees in too many areas. So it was just growing in, and the birds felt, I think, boxed in, closed in, and suffered, the reproductive predation was elevated, things like that. So they cut a lot of mature trees down. And then they bought a roller chopper, a big mechanical drum that's got fins on it. They pull it behind a bulldozer, and they're doing like 1,500 acres a year with it. I mean, massive numbers of acres. And so that's just knocking that vertical structure that's like 10 feet, 4 to 10 feet of aspen and oak brush. And in wall-to-wall brush is not good sharp-tail habitat. That's more like rough grouse habitat. So if they fall behind on prescribed burning, it sort of drives all this. Every 3 to 5 years, they burn these units. And, if it's a really wet spring, it's hard to get in there and burn. So this year, I think they burned 8,000 or 9,000 acres. And so, I mean, big acres. So they were getting the resources needed to do the burning. So what happened, it was too brushy and too many trees.
Yeah.
And so they knocked the brush down, and they reduced the trees, and they created more grass. I mean, when you and I hunt out west, it's such a different species. It's like you're walking through grass. There's no brush. There is, but it's so minor. And so I think what I see is, I think the sharp-tails will tolerate some brush in Wisconsin, but we're sort of always on the edge of too much brush. And I think it's a real fine line to have too much brush. And all of a sudden, I mean, Crex Meadows used to have quite a few birds, and the resources and the burn windows. And it was a matter of like less than 5 years, the population crashed. I mean, it's that sensitive to habitat quality. And we're always trying to get an eye to, what's that blend of grass versus brush. And, they kind of need some of that brush for winter escape cover, but how much is too much? Yeah, habitat quality was not there. And then all the weather, all those things can play big pushes on it, but it's the actual habitat itself is the driving factor.
Yeah. So having some experience myself on some of these barrens properties, I haven't, and I've been out west, as you mentioned, have an idea of what some of these places look like, and some of them have a lot of brush. When it comes to like lowering the brush on, say, muckle barrens or wherever, is there reason to, are there competing interests as to, hey, we have this barrens, but we want some of this brush for species A, sharp-tails need less, or is the fact that the brush is there more a result of how difficult it is to get in there and fight succession, as you said, and just simply get in there and do these treatments and reduce that brush and maintain these open spaces in an area that wants to grow trees and wood and brush?
You got it. That's exactly it. It's the challenges of fighting the brush. I don't think there's a dog in the fight to say, hey, I want to see more brush because of these other species. I think there's a universal agreement that we're always fighting brush because it wants to grow brush. So I think this is how it historically was in that those systems it was burned a lot in the summer and fall. So a lot of this open landscape was burned on its own from lightning strikes, but a lot of it was Native American burning and managing the blueberry crop. And it just took fire like crazy. And so, I mean, they would pick the blueberries. This is the oral tradition. They pick the blueberries and they'd light the fire when they're done picking blueberries. Well, that means they're doing that like in the next few weeks and month. And to do that in the modern era is challenging because in getting a fire to carry in those conditions can be challenging. Staffing, a lot of that time of year, there's a lot of Western fires. A lot of local resources go west.
Nick's family cabin is right down the road.
Yes.
You name it, right?
Yep. Yeah. So getting fire on the landscape's hard, and growing season burns, instead of doing growing season burns, which would effectively is harder on that woody vegetation because they have a lot of nutrients and energy above ground. So when you're cooking that in August, in early September, you're really stressing those trees out a lot. And then they suffer by that fire. And if you do a repeated fire, you're slowly killing off some of that brush. Well, if you flip the script and burn in the spring, when the folks are staffed up for fire prevention, they got all the equipment out, and you have a lot of staff. Well, when you have appropriate burn windows, you go out and do some prescribed burning. It's just an easier time. The fire staff is engaged and ready. And in my opinion is, okay, so then you burn in the spring, all the nutrients are below ground. So you're just sort of top killing the standing dormant. And that stresses the tree a little bit, but most of the nutrients are below ground. So then when you top kill it, it just explodes back with vigor. And so over time, you're basically encouraging more and more aspen regrowth or something, because it's
Gotcha.
stressed, but it can respond really strongly. But if you do that in the growing season, it's stressed and you're actually depleting the savings account of that tree over time. And the deposits in the summer can't keep up with the withdrawals of the burn. And so then you're slowly pushing it back. So I think what's happening is our timing of burning needs to be done more in the growing season. And everybody acknowledges that. And there's just sort of the challenges of the staffing, and burn windows are a lot less to do that in the growing season. And that's where mechanical treatment comes in. I think there's an acknowledgement that it's the best management practices for managing barrens, I think, requires being open to that roller chopper and just spending a lot more time physically knocking it down. I'm going to have a contract on the Bass Lake Barrens that's going to start, I think, next week. And I'm contracting out 300 acres of roller chopping during the growing season to basically really hurt that clone and knock it back so it's less vigorous. And then we'll burn it next year with the idea that 1-2 punch will sort of push it into a more of a grass condition by, setting the aspen back. So long-winded answer, it's that brush is really hard to hold back. And people talk about keeping some of it around, the property managers, but that's not what we're talking about. It's like we're really struggling to just keep it at bay.
Yeah, that makes sense. In and around these places often enough where it's kind of, those are the things I think about when I'm driving by and kind of looking at how they develop and stuff. But really, you're going to have, these barrens are in places where it's basically an open area surrounded by a sea of forest, right? So you're going to have brush and forest on the edges of all these places, but you're just trying to keep the open areas open so that they can be actual barrens and be of benefit to a species like sharp-tailed grouse.
You got it. Yep.
Very interesting. All right, so the season, now my plan is to have this episode release Friday, the week before the deadline, give or take. So if you're listening to this and you hadn't heard about this and you thought about this, what are you got to be a Wisconsin resident, right? So I'm excluded. Or do you not?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, really? Wow, I didn't even know that.
I applied. I think
for some reason there's a seed in my head about maybe the old season, like not being open to non-residents or something. I'm not even aware, but man, you might have just made me excited. I can apply?
Yeah, I'm reading on website. I'm not seeing anything on
if you have a podcast, only. Are you disqualified?
You automatically get a tag. What's that?
Yeah. Okay, so research for me to do after the show. Yeah, you maybe anybody listening could apply. I don't know. But my ultimate question was, okay, so you get drawn. There's going to be very few people. Is it a one bird limit? That's also something that I'm remembering from seasons old.
Yep. And then when
it's like a ceremonial, like,
yes,
go cut the dog loose. If you're lucky, you get a bird, and
yep.
It's a win, like you said, for habitat and for sharptails in Wisconsin. And it's a very small hunting season, but it is an opportunity that did not exist last year and for years before that.
Exactly. We got to start from somewhere. I'm really hoping we can have a consistent season going forward every year. A limited number maybe grows a little bit. Maybe we add another property like the Nemacolin Barrens if we kind of get up. And then, we're going to, as long as we can, it's going to be limited. It's very, sort of a trophy in a sense of a Wisconsin Sharp-tail. And when you harvest that Sharp-tail, the state wants like photos taken of the wing and like get some data on this bird, sex the bird. I mean, these are important birds. I mean, it takes a lot to put these birds on the landscape. So to harvest them, that's a big call too. And we want to get as much information from those birds as well. So, and that will help, I think, hunters sort of, full circle. Hey, I'm part of this, and this is what I harvested. These are the pictures. And if there's any questions, the DNR is more than happy to take hey, give me a call and I'll come out and look at that bird. If you can't take a picture of it, what kind of ratio, adult, juvenile, get information on that bird. But
yeah, wow, that's cool. So I'm thinking ahead. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that maybe somewhere out there, a listener of the Birdshot Podcast will draw one of these tags and maybe go on a hunt, and whether they're successful or not, maybe we can get them on the show and we can talk about that coming full circle. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, so 2018 is the last time we had a season. So
that's not that long ago, but
no,
still.
It's not super long. No. And it was
that at Creek's Meadow only?
No, I believe that was on Nemacolin, I think.
Actually, you know what? Mark Parman, we just interviewed, who as well. He might have hunted the Barnes Barrens, if I recall correctly.
Okay. I think it was. So we part of the new Sharp-tail plan is we redrew. Things needed to be updated. It was an old plan, and it was the harvest units were more reflective of a different era when birds were sort of scattered across the entire landscape. Now the birds are basically anchored to these focused properties. So the last thing we want is to have a zone drawn that includes a very small population of sharp-tails.
Right.
Where, that
20 people go there, take 20 birds and knock them way back. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're updating a lot of that stuff currently. The state is, and I'm a part of helping out on that, and so that we've anchored it to the property. So if there's a harvest opportunity, it'll be Creek's Meadows now, and if something else, it'll be this property or that property going forward.
So being involved on the Sharp-tailed Grouse Society board, and you and I have taken trips out west together. Was that really were some of your trips out west, did that kind of, you come home, I remember asking Parman about this, did that kind of sort of spur your interest and intrigue in sharp-tails and push you to get more involved in where you are today?
Absolutely. I might have covered this in past podcasts, but they were on the county forest, and I really didn't even think about them. But I think once I went out west and held one in my hand, I was like, wow, this bird of the prairie we actually have in my county. It just seems like, wow, a totally different landscape. But I guess it's just holding opportunity to hunt the bird, harvest a bird, the respect for the bird, just like the uniqueness of that opportunity Wisconsin has. I was like, I'm fired up. Do what I can to grow that population here. And again, hunting season is great, but I'm doing all this work not to hunt them. I'm just, persistence of the species is cool.
I guess what else is there to be? Now I did an episode years ago. We did a whole episode on Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse. You were on the show. We talked about it a little bit before. It's come up from time to time. But anything else we need to know about? Like if somebody doesn't know what a barrens is, maybe we could have done that 20 minutes ago. But fill us in on what that is, because it is really unique. And they have I believe we did talk about this too, that Barrens habitat is one of the most under threat habitat types, nationwide. And so there's a larger call to action around Barrens habitat for some other bird species that folks may be familiar with. But
yeah, the Barrens system is what they call a globally imperiled system. And it's unique to very droughty soils. So New Jersey has a few. I mean, it's very rare. They exist in small areas around the country, and Wisconsin has barrens in northeast Wisconsin. And so there's other barrens locations even in Wisconsin that don't currently have sharp-tails, that used to have sharp-tails, but for all the reasons we talked about, some of these properties have just lost those. It's an interesting landscape in that, most of northern Wisconsin is forest. And so you drive around, you see trees of various ages, and then you drive into the barrens. It's like, where'd the trees go? It's really open. There might be a scattered tree here and there, and it's just brushy, short brush, grass, prairie grasses. So visually, it's a much different landscape, and it's just, but that's so very sandy soils, burn frequently, great for blueberries, and so they were maintained through indigenous practices in a lot of these areas. And just the lightning strikes, it's very sandy soil, fire prone, fire ripped across this landscape, and kept it open. And so there were pockets of trees, jack pine, red pine, aspen, oak, were here and there, but it's just a much more open landscape. Trees are short, scattered, tall trees. Just a big departure from, red pine plantations or aspen mature forest. So by having an open landscape like that for that long a time, species adapt to it and they specialize in it. And so thousands of years of open landscapes, you have birds, butterflies, plants that thrive in that landscape. And then when you stop burning, plant trees, that landscape shrinks down. And so by default, the species that we're utilizing and adapted to that aren't adapted to a red pine plantation or a mature aspen or oak forest or a man-made structures. So by default, those species drop in abundance and then they become rare. And so then, okay, why are they're rare? Because the habitat has been lost, because things are so different. So yeah, it's a very diverse landscape. People, if you see a barrens, it's sort of the name barren, it's barren landscape. But really, when you kind of drill into having a botanist out there, and we can talk about this, but the annual Sharp-tailed Grouse meeting is on Saturday, and we're going to have someone who specializes in moth and butterfly. We paid him at the county to do some inventory to look at moth and butterfly, the diversity of just those types of things, which grouse will eat, birds will eat. And so there's hundreds of species that are unique to the barrens landscape, but they're not like, look at the big charismatic megafauna. There goes the elk. There goes the, something that's big and it's small and it's a plant, or it's a upland sandpiper, or it's a golden wing warbler, or a vesper sparrow, or a sharp-tailed grouse. These birds that come and go. So it takes a little more engagement to say, okay, I don't see a lot, but if you kind of zoom in and spend time there, you'll start hearing birds, seeing plants, flowering unique prairie plants that are unique to the landscape. It draws you in, I think, with the openness. And as a forester, I spent a lot of time in the woods, and you kind of step out in the open, like, oh, this is unique. And this actually was the norm in Northwest Wisconsin, not the forest I was just managing. So it's the ironic of flipping sort of the script of 99% of it's now forested. Back in the day, 99% of it was pretty open. So, yeah, there's a lot of specialized species that are hanging on in those landscapes. And I think part of this restoration effort we're doing up and down the Northwest Sands is to just physically give them space to live, the plants and the birds to hang on. And by creating more stepping stones and acres of habitat for sharp-tails, we're also providing a lot of opportunity for these other unique plant and animal species.
Yeah, it's a very unique landscape. I was entirely unfamiliar with it prior to me starting to stop. It would have been shortly after. I think I might have told this on the show before, but shortly after my family bought a cabin in that area, I remember I was driving around scouting like the big blocks of public, and like I had the rough grouse goggles on, and like I drove into Muckwa Barrens, and I remember thinking like, what is this? This isn't rough grouse habitat.
Yeah. Yep.
Things looked a lot different to me anyways. There was a lot I had yet to learn about that habitat. I would look at it differently now, but specifically the same kind of story arc as you, going out west, hunting sharp-tails, just sort of finding this new appreciation for such a unique bird. And then, oh my gosh, they're right here in our backyard. I mean, it's just little things, little connections like that. They really change your perspective, which is the takeaway for me. Like, you think something one day, but try to keep an open mind. That's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So August 1st is coming up. That would be the deadline to apply for this hunt. That's also the time when sort of quiet periods lift, and sometimes folks go back out and start running bird dogs. Anything to be mindful of there? These are small properties. If you've ever been to one of them before, like in the late summer training season, sometimes crowds can develop on these properties, that sort of thing. But obviously that's why the deadline or the dates are there in place to protect young chicks and young birds. But anything that you would pass along for people potentially thinking about that?
Right. I would say try not to flush those birds multiple times, move in a different direction. And if you get them up, good. And just try and find some more birds in a different location, give them time to settle down, regroup. And just, yeah, it does get busy on some of the barrens properties. But there's birds there. I'd say, be respectful of other people and other dogs and other distances. I know there's some, you know, people are excited to run their dogs on wild sharp-tails in the state of Wisconsin. So I get it, showing up and just putting your dogs on a native species like that's exciting. And what we're seeing is more desire to do that, more pressure to do that. And it's leading to those birds are in the air a lot from, handlers. And again, I think the quiet period is, the birds should be able to handle some of that, but you don't want to overdo it with a lot of extra pressure we'll get one more point out of this single that flew. Because sometimes you can have a late hatch, you can have some small birds. And I mean, I would personally just, if it's a wet morning, maybe let it dry up a little bit, flushing a young bird out of the dew in the morning. And the dog might catch. I mean, these things do happen occasionally. I hope they don't. But, it's August 1st is a safe date, but, you can have some late hatches with some small birds and, I guess be aware of, pressuring those birds too much, maybe on those wet mornings, maybe take your time to, let the things dry out so those birds are dry enough they can fly well and get away. Stuff like that. I think just common courtesy.
Common sense, common courtesy, ethics, use your head out there. I've done it. I've run my dogs on sharp-tails in Wisconsin. I know you have, Mike, and not so much in recently. I don't feel like I got to drive a little ways to get to those places, and I'm not that desperate to get those wild bird contacts at this point. But, as far as I'm concerned, other people can do it and enjoy it and do it respectfully. And, small sample size, look at what's occurring on Creeks Meadows with bird populations and quality habitat. There's room for both activities, for successful populations of birds and people running dogs, and even a hunting season this fall, which is even cooler. But obviously nothing is guaranteed. Next year is, we don't know. So we still have to be mindful of all those factors.
Absolutely. Caution is the name of the game. And we may not have enough birds to have a season, and we just have to realize that we have these thresholds, and we just have to stick to what we feel is good for the bird population. And I think there's a common understanding to do that, but a lot of good opportunity, and the season will add another unique opportunity. So again, back to it's a pretty cool thing to be able to, if you want to drive and get your dog on prairie chickens in Wisconsin, you can do that, or sharp-tailed grouse. It's special to have that opportunity here.
There is one other thing that I wanted to mention regarding sharp-tails. You had sent me not long ago a kind of an observation tool that is, if you observe a sharp-tailed grouse, is it any? I'll let you step in and tell us about it. But if we're going to make that available to folks, if folks are very interested and they're out doing this sort of thing and they want to log these observations of where they're seeing sharp-tailed grouse, there is a way to do that. You got to download an app on your phone and jump through a few hoops. So I'll leave that up to the listeners if they want to do that. But tell us a little bit about that observation tool and who might be using it.
There's been a lack of information on broods, late summer populations. We do a lot of survey work in the spring for adult males, and they're vocalizing, and we see females flying around, but the males on the leks, and the females will do attending. But nesting success. We could talk about the weather, and South Iron River got almost 6 inches last night. Yeah, overnight.
Really?
I mean, if that would have fallen a month ago, oh my gosh, I don't know how many birds we'd have left. They'd be drowned out. But so what we know is there's sort of a gap of information. Staff isn't out there flushing birds to see what kind of brood counts, survival we've had. But we know who's out there. People running their dogs after August 1st. And so I think that's a unique opportunity to get hunters and handlers engaged in providing a bunch of new data to say, hey, we're, this kind of recruitment we're getting, and, how many are getting up, and, generally which way they're flying. And there's some other details, but I think it's going to fill in a blank spot, and it's going to give citizens an opportunity to do citizen science in a productive way to fill kind of an unknown by, tapping into that user group that time of the year. So it's new. And I think I'm encouraging, I think you'll try and connect an opportunity for people to download that on your podcast here. But I think I really encourage people that are going out to Nemacolin Barrens and Wisconsin Barrens properties to record that, because that stuff matters. I mean, people are looking at that, and they will look at that, and we will look at that. So recording what you see and the details in that app, I think, is going to be huge to sort of rounding out the picture of how these birds are progressing through the year.
Okay. And folks can, again, if that QR code is in the show notes or a link, if we have that available, it will be there and fairly self-explanatory. But does the submission form, is it walking them through, like, what did you see, like an adult male or a brood, or do you just kind of add in your own commentary? What do you recall from it?
I actually haven't used it yet. So,
okay.
I have it on my phone here. I think.
Well, it's before August 1st, so you're not out there running your dogs. So.
Yeah, we got. I think it's going to be adult male or adult bird, and then they're going to ask for number of young, I believe. Just bear with me. I got it on my phone here. I got an early edition.
Yeah, and I've got mine downloaded already too. So.
Yeah, this is really great. So it'll automatically record the location, total males, total females, total young, and any additional comments. And you can take some pictures if you want, if there's something unique about the habitat. And males and females, of course, are really, you don't really know that. So I think you just put in the best you can. But I think the young is really the thing we're trying to hone in on.
Yeah. So really observing a sharp-tailed grouse sighting with a location, giving you data. If it's a group of sharp-tails, maybe you notate that or add that in there.
And I think we can be able to mine that data quite a bit. Where are they in the morning? What time of the day? Are they hanging in the woody vegetation? Are they more in the open? And it may actually help drive habitat management. We kind of know generally where birds hang out, where they nest in the spring, but where are they in the summer? Is there some things we don't know about how they use that diverse habitat? Because it is quite diverse. I mean, from a distance, it looks the same, but we start walking through it. This patch is more open. This is scrub brush. This is aspen brush. This has got blueberries. This has rose hips. This is closer to water. Are there things we can learn about where people are finding birds consistently?
Okay, so that's sharp-tailed. Anything else? Where should folks go? I've got the website here. It is wisharptails.org. They could learn more, and of course, I saw something about Onyx up there. Is that a member drive? Share for Sharp-tails with Onyx. Oh yeah, 1 month free. Click. Okay, yeah. I was, when you were talking about this app earlier, I was wondering, like, man, does Onyx have any sort of user observation inputs stuff? There is some stuff here, actually.
There is some stuff. Yeah, Onyx was developing kind of a parallel system to, again, they have a great product that people are carrying along with them, and you can drop waypoints. And
oh yeah, actually, yeah. So I suppose, yeah, there is a whole, I've not seen this before, but it kind of walks you through the screenshots. Like if you were out and you flushed a sharp-tail, it says drop a pin, label it STG flush. I'll drop a link to this in the show notes, but then share that waypoint via email with science@wisharptails.org. That's really cool.
Yep, okay. That's another way to collect data. And that sort of predates this survey 123, I will say.
Right.
So, I mean, I think both systems are good. Whatever works for folks, utilize it.
Yeah, so if they've got their Onyx up and they're just in there and they want to do it that way, they can do that as well. Okay, cool. Yeah, wisharptails.org. You guys have merchandise. It's a membership, so folks, if they want to contribute, they could sign up, join. There's links there. The County Forester. Now, rough grouse report, broods, grouse. What are you seeing? I know early on you were a little hesitant, then you started seeing some broods. What can you tell me, Mike?
I saw the drumming counts came back and it's at 8% down in the north. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess we got to go to the southwest.
8% down.
Yes.
Okay. But that is year over year. And last year they were up quite a bit, right?
Yes. That was a pretty good population. Yep. Actually, I think it was down from the year before. 2 years ago, it was really high. Last year was down, but down from pretty good high numbers. I mean, it's still solid. And I mean, personally, okay, so it's down 8%. We had a really weird spring. It was a late spring, cold spring. These birds, I think the drumming dates are, I think they're catching the birds that are there, but it's a course tool. It's informational. I'm not worried about 8% drop. I've been seeing broods now. I've been seeing some smaller broods, some bigger broods, but I'm seeing, anecdotal me going through the woods, I'm regularly seeing grouse broods and 5 to 10 birds in some of these broods. So I would say I'm confident going into the fall saying there's birds to be found. I kind of always feel that way because I feel like our population is generally pretty stable and high quality habitat in northern Wisconsin. I feel like if you onyx and spend time, you can find birds. There's droughts, there's time. I mean, that's grouse hunting. You flush a bunch of birds and then you go for a 2-hour walk and you flush nothing. And that's just part of grouse hunting. But I think consistently looking at what I expect to see this year, I've seen birds. I'm confident the bird numbers will be fine.
Yeah. Good deal. Do you use the WI game bird layer in Onyx, or do you have everything stored right up here?
No, I do use that game bird. Absolutely. I all the tools available at the touch or on the screen. Again, in my head, I mean, I'll be honest, there's habitat that's not necessarily typed as aspen and we should all know that aspen's a prime habitat, but they cover a lot of different habitats that are adjacent and conifer different times of the year, different times of the day. So it's a good tool. I spent a lot of time in that aspen polygon that shows up on Onyx, but I also, kind of know the forest and where I've seen them during the week and where in the winter at. So I'm really fortunate to kind of have a year round, map of where these birds are coming and going. And I'm always amazed. There's always, are we over hunting these birds in these aspen polygons? How many people go in there, how successful they are. I really want to start doing some research on the county forest we're actually talking about doing that, hiring to do some male grouse density surveys, occupancy of aspen. We're trying to increase our habitat management quality. I've been talking about making smaller harvest units, doing more reserve islands, trying to just maximize the benefit of these harvest units for a lot of species, including ruffed grouse. And there's needs that a 200-acre aspen clear cut, that's not going to meet a lot of their life needs. So how do we make these harvest units more structured, staggered, and provide a lot of continuity of habitat across the spectrum? And that's our goal in the county forest. And we're 5 years into really focused on that. And it would be neat to do some research to see, okay, what a traditional harvest, big unit, and these smaller harvest units, and just, are we increasing the density of male birds, which would be awesome because then, obviously there's more birds in a small area, but that means it's better quality habitat. So I'm excited to see that. And I think we're just seeing better quality habitat, and I see birds in habitats nobody's hunting. I mean, and they're there in the middle of, in pretty good, hunting conditions. I'll see them in a young jack pine plantation or a young red pine plant. And again, the density maybe isn't as high, but nobody's hunting these birds in a jack pine plantation, but they're drumming all spring in there. They're spending time in there. And it just, I'm always fascinated by where hunters go, what's available, how successful they are, sink populations, source populations. And I think those birds are utilizing a lot of the different timber types, even throughout the fall. And you can find them anywhere, but just generally higher density in the aspen. But I'm not too worried. We're over harvesting them in northern Wisconsin, wherever we go. I feel like we have such a robust habitat framework that things are in pretty good shape.
It's a little harder to shoot in those jack pines too.
Well, exactly. That's your reservoir population.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey buddy, I appreciate the time as always. Appreciate catching up with the county forester. Keep up the great work, my friend. You're doing us all a favor, and it's awesome to talk to resource professionals like you that are, of course, passionate about the resources and sustainability, but you share that passion for bird dogs and upland birds as we all do. And I love it, man. Folks can follow you at Grouse Wimes on Instagram, and keep it up, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Nick. I appreciate it.
All right, Mitty. We'll catch you next time, and we'll see you in the woods, buddy.
Yep.
Hey, everyone. It's your host, Nick here. One more thing before you go. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Birdshot Podcast presented by Onyx Hunt. Be sure to subscribe and follow the show so you don't miss our next episode. And if you really love the show and want to contribute above and beyond what you already do by listening, you can do so by joining our Patreon community. Click the link in the show notes to this episode. You can sign up for as little as $5 a month. And if you do, I will send you some of these Birdshot Podcast can coolers and stickers as a thank you for doing so. Thanks, everyone. Catch you on the next episode of the Birdshot Podcast.